This is Doc with Thoroughfan, and there's been a lot of questions lately that have popped up. They've kind of always been circulating, but I think with the events that have happened over the last 3 or 4 weeks involving the Triple Crown races and more national media attention being placed on things about drug testing in racehorses and how do we exactly determine if a horse did receive an illegal substance or even had an overage of a allowed therapeutic medication that may still be in their system come race day or for racing or things like that. And even some of, the performance-enhancing drug accusations that follow a lot of trainers. And, the big question comes in, well, why can't we just test these horses? Why can't we figure out what's going on? Why can't we find these substances? And it's a very kind of detailed explanation that goes into all of that, both in the testing procedure and also why, as they say, the cheaters always seem to be one step ahead of the chemists that are working in the testing labs. So I figured, while we have talked about this subject a little bit in Thoroughfan before, I might try a little bit of a different approach now using some fun molecular models here to kind of explain first how the testing procedure is done, and also then why the cheaters can sometimes stay one step ahead of the testing laboratory. So, let's go ahead and have some fun with models as we take a little bit of a deeper dive and discuss drug testing in racehorses. Oh, that's not going to be a good hydrocarbon cleanup. So we're going to try to keep this, kind of on a very basic level of understanding. If you really want to dive deeper into the whole concept of drug testing in any sport, including horse racing, believe me, this segment could go on for weeks if you really wanted to get into the biochemical minutia of it. So we're really going to try to just stay at kind of the 30,000, 40,000 foot level to explain things to help people understand, one, how the testing procedure is done, and drugs are detected, and also why it is not possible to detect every single possible performance-enhancing drug that is out there, especially the new ones that are coming on the black market, so to speak, all of the time. And it all has to do, again, with molecular structure. But before that, let's just, again, kind of re-go over a little bit of post-race testing and what's involved. Now, this protocol probably will change a little bit under HIWU and HISA because they're not going to necessarily be testing every horse that wins every race. At least that's what they've put forth as how their testing protocol is going to work. But in most jurisdictions, what has gone on is the winner of every race was tested. Sometimes the second and third place finisher was as well, depending on the racing jurisdiction. Sometimes all the horses in a race are tested, as in the case of the Kentucky Derby or Preakness or one of the major stakes racing events out there. Sometimes the stewards can also order what they call a special, and usually there's 3 or 4 specials done on every race card where a certain horse is either picked at random in a race to just go off for post-race testing, or if a horse doesn't perform the way they think it should, if a huge odds-on favorite ends up running last, or a horse that seems to outrun their odds all of a sudden, and do a lot better than maybe they were projected to do or have done in the past, the stewards may order that horse to have some post-race drug testing done as well. And so these tests are done in what is known as the test barn. So after the race, the horse is taken to the test barn, and this is a very secure location where only usually the handler of the horse, maybe the trainer, and anybody who has a special permission to be in the test barn is allowed in. That's it. They have special water buckets for these horses. They have special cooling out procedures for these horses to make sure there's as little a chance of environmental contamination as possible happening in the test barn. So these horses, as they're cooling out, they will be encouraged to urinate. Fun little fact, if you've ever been around racehorses and you notice a lot of people whistling when a horse urinates, what they're actually trying to do is train that sound to get the horse to urinate. So it's a little bit of a trick to, when they're in the test barn, to kind of encourage them to go ahead and urinate on command, so to speak, with that whistle. But usually it is a licensed technician or commissioned veterinarian that is in the test barn that will go ahead and take these blood and urine samples, and then the samples are put through a procedure where they are put into a proper chain of custody so that they reach the lab in the safest and most secure way possible without any tampering possible in between. And we can talk about that in a future segment, exactly how that chain of custody works. Once they're at the lab, they are going to undergo a couple of different types of testing. Now, the first is kind of a general screening test. And what this is again, almost like on a 30,000 foot level. The blood and urine samples are going to be put through various types of testing, usually either gas or liquid chromatography with mass spectrometry, or ELISA testing. And again, all big fancy words. Don't worry so much about what they mean or what the process is. Just understand that what they are doing is looking for signals on the result sheet that may indicate that a substance that is prohibited is in that sample. Now, that can either be a truly illegal substance, such as a performance-enhancing drug, a drug that has no purpose in being the horse whatsoever, or an overage of what we call a therapeutic medication. So a medication that a horse may have received during training or right up to a certain withdrawal point before a race to help with issues such as inflammation or some other health issue the horse may have. That substance usually is not allowed to be in their system during race day or during the race, and sometimes they do notice that those substances are still found in an amount that is not allowed and can lead to a disqualification. Again, kind of a talk a little bit for another segment. But it all is based on molecular structure. So the way a lot of these tests work is by having a known sample of the substance. So let's take the instance of meloxicam, let's say. This is the substance that was found in Forte's post-race samples after the Hopeful, and was the cause for the disqualification there in the appeals process that's going on. Well, the only way that a lab can actually test for a substance is to know what the substance is and to have a kind of what they call a verified sample of it to ensure that they are finding the same sample in these or the same drug, I should say, in these post-race samples. And that means that they have a drug that has a specific molecular structure, and that molecular structure gives a certain type of peak or a certain type of output on a results graph with these elaborate machines, or a certain color change if you're talking about an ELISA test. Whatever the method of determining that substance is there is picked up by that screening test. Now, if that screening test picks up one of those substances, that sample is then put through much more rigorous testing, where they will take a known type of that drug or substance, and they will compare it to what has been found in the post-race sample. And if the two match, which means that the molecular structure is the same, because that's what these tests are based on, then they feel comfortable calling that a true positive. Now, sometimes it's a case of where it is just the presence of that drug being there, which basically means that a zero threshold, as we say. So if the drug is there or the substance is there, that's an automatic positive and the horse is disqualified. Or you look at a certain threshold level, and this is where you hear things about the picograms per ml and the nanograms per ml, and how many nanograms or picograms per ml of blood this substance happened to be in. And if it approaches or goes over a certain level that is considered to have an effect on the horse based on other research that has been done, then that is considered a disqualification and a positive. And this is where a lot of the debate goes on right now as to how truly effective at altering things in a horse can these minutia levels of these drugs be. Again, topic for another segment. We're just talking about how the testing works in this situation. Now, the tests are going to look for, as I said, evidence of one of two things. They're going to look for evidence of the drug itself, or they're going to look for evidence of what we call metabolites of the drug. So sometimes you'll hear about a test coming up where they found a metabolite of a drug, say like acepromazine, which is a sedative. They didn't find the drug itself. And that is because any drug that is kind of given into a horse or a person or another type of organism is usually going to be broken down and altered as it passes through that horse's system, either by the liver, the kidneys, other enzymatic processes, whatever. So if you had this, let's say if this whole molecule here represented acepromazine, after a while the drug is broken down, like that, and you kind of have what we now call two different metabolites. And so these are things that they may also screen for or test for. Now, the way they determine what these metabolites are is through one of two processes. It's either through testing that is done by the drug manufacturer themselves, where they go ahead and have to do all the pharmacological studies, as we say, in order to get the drug FDA approved, so they know what the drug breaks down to because they've done the testing themselves. Or some of these drug testing laboratories are also research labs, and I think people forget about that aspect of it. All these samples that come in and drug possibilities that come in, these research labs will look at these and sometimes use test herds of their own to see exactly how these drugs are broken down, under what time frames, and all of that stuff, to be able to help create tests for the various metabolites that may be out there. And this helps, again, in determining whether a drug was actually given to the animal or not, because you may not find the actual drug, but you may find its metabolites. So that's the way the kind of testing works on substances that are known and things that we test for routinely all the time. Now, let's talk a little bit about what everybody kind of accuses some trainers of, and even owners of, or veterinarians of, where they are, using drugs that can't be detected, or new drugs out in the market that there is no test for. And why can't we just find them on a blood test and that be the end of it? Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that, and again, it has to go on the molecular structure. So let's say that there was this new great drug that came out on the black market for racing. We'll call it Rebrachium, and this was something that was being given to the horses, and it was allowing them to perform well past what their natural abilities were. They're running much higher Bayer speed figures or other speed figures. They're just blowing the competition away, and but they're constantly coming back clean on all of the post-race drug tests, so nobody can figure out exactly what's going on. Well, why is that? Why can't we find this drug? Well, it's because there is no standard of Rebrachium, as we shall say, or metabolites of Rebrachium that the reference labs have access to create a test to look for the substance. So this is where a lot of that old-fashioned detective work comes in, of finding these samples in barn searches, in vehicle searches, sometimes having somebody tip investigators off as to who may be using this Rebrachium substance. Things of that nature. And then once the labs get a sample of it, they can actually work backwards and then create a test that can be used to detect the substance either in blood or urine. Now, they may have to do some, again, research of their own on this to exactly figure out what exact metabolites this breaks down into, because let's be honest, if you're getting this stuff off the black market, so to speak, there's probably not good pharmacological studies done on these substances where, they know exactly what they're going to be breaking down into. So the research labs have to do a little bit of their own work on this one to be able to kind of determine exactly what the substance is. Okay, so let's say that happens, and Rebrachium all of a sudden is identified, and there's testing for it now, so the horsemen are all concerned, the ones that were, cheating and using it anyway. Is there any way that they can still potentially use Rebrachium and not get caught? The answer to that is yes, and this is where it is so hard to stay ahead of the cheaters in any sports doping program. This is not just racing, we're just talking about any sports doping program. And it has to do with all the levels of really minute biochemical changes. So let's say that this, again, is Rebrachium, and this section down here is what has the effect of the performance-enhancing effect of making these horses run, off the screen and just perform way past what they naturally would be able to do. However, when the testing was designed, it was looking more for molecular issues over here that the test would identify. So all a biochemist and these microchemists have to do now, and they can do it, and it's not too difficult to do if you have the intelligence and then the facilities to be able to do it, is they will take something up here. So let's say, again, this is the area that they're looking at. They will just rotate or change the structure of this molecule slightly. And when that happens, basically now you still have the same performance-enhancing effect down here, but because this is different, the test won't pick it up. That is basically why it is so hard for us, or I should say, those folks in the regulatory realm to constantly stay ahead of what these cheaters are doing. It's because you can't test for something if you don't have the molecular structure of the substance to actually form a test for. Now, it may still show up as a weird kind of blip on some of those screening tests, or if they're looking more specifically at a certain area of a type of drug or molecule. However, they don't know truly what it is until they have a reference sample to compare it to. Again, that's why it is so hard to catch the cheaters, folks. And again, this is in any sports doping program, not just racing. This happens all over the place. A substance such as Rebrachium may be the latest, greatest craze, and until a test is found for it, basically there's no way to catch these people in the act, aside from good old-fashioned police and detective work, wiretaps, things of that nature, where you catch people discussing it, or you find things in barn searches, vehicle searches, things like that, where then the labs can produce a test. So that hopefully explains, I would hope, a little bit easier why it is difficult to catch cheaters when testing is being done, why not every molecule out there can have a test immediately done for it, and how easy it is now in the world of microchemistry to change the molecular structure of a molecule or a substance or a drug slightly, still have the effect, but can't find the test. And trust me, it's as frustrating for us as racing fans and those that follow the sport very closely, I'm sure, as it is for the regulators that are trying to catch the folks red-handed, so to speak, or maybe red and white balled, so to speak. So again, I hope that helps explain a little bit as to what goes into the drug testing process, how these drugs are detected, and why the cheaters will probably still always be one step ahead of the testing labs, at least for the foreseeable future. Now, there's good news, because on the horizon, there is something that a few labs, and again, the Petrol Lab in PA has been working on this a lot, and it's looking at not trying to find the drug itself, but trying to find evidence of the drug being given in the individual horse. And this is being done through something called biomarkers and changes in blood chemistry, blood parameters. It's kind of in its infant stage a little bit as far as being able to be used as a reliable testing medium that will stand up to the scrutiny of litigation and courtroom and legal work and all of that. But what it does do is that instead of, again, trying to look for the, let's say, evidence of the drug rebrachium, since we seem to be using that as an example, but what kind of biomarkers or other materials or proteins or whatever you might find in the samples of the horses that were given this drug. That is almost impossible to fake. So, or for the chemist to try to somehow alter so that the biomarkers are different. It's much more difficult probably for them to try to figure out. So that's what's on the horizon. If we can get what we call these bio passports to work out really well, it's really going to revolutionize and game change the way that we do post-race and out-of-competition drug testing in horses. So hope that answers some questions. If anybody has any other questions about this, again, I tried to really keep it kind of on like a 30, 40,000 foot level. Please put them in the comments, contacting us here at Thoroughfan. Put it in the comments of the social media posts you may have seen this from. If I can't get the answer for you, I will certainly find somebody who can. And hope, we had a little fun playing with models today and learned a little bit about drug testing as well. So I am Doc for Thoroughfan, and as always, if you are looking for the most accurate and up-to-date information when it comes to this great sport of thoroughbred racing that is made solely for you, the racing fan, by us, the racing fans, there's only one place you need to turn, and that is right here at Thoroughfan. Oh dear, I think I just created a new drug.